Hi everyone, welcome back to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I am Rajni Bharara, your host, and before I move ahead, I would like to again read out this very important disclaimer. By watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. All right, now after this very important disclaimer, welcome back everyone. I am Rajni Bharara, your host, and you are watching Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. And this is a platform where we dive deep into the ever evolving landscape of immigration policies and their impact on job opportunities. Today, we are turning our attention to a very critical issue at the intersection of immigration and human rights, the legal rights and protections available to immigrant victims of human trafficking. This topic delves into the recent distressing events such as the Princeton Human Trafficking Scandal, shedding light on the challenges immigrants face in the United States. And to guide us through this complex topic, we are honored to have again none other than Jonathan Wasden, an esteemed litigation attorney specializing in immigration law and policy. So, without any further ado, let's give him a warm welcome. John, welcome back to the show once again.
Hi, good to be with you.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you, John. And today we are going to discuss a lot about, this Princeton human trafficking scandal that happened very recently. But before I jump into the questions, I would like to tell our lovely viewers that we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. And the handle is Immigration Talk Show. So don't forget to subscribe to us. And if you have any question related to this topic, you are more than welcome to post your questions in the comments below, and yes, we'll be taking those questions and we'll be asking those questions from John. Now, John, without any further ado, let me again, before I jump into the Princeton human trafficking scandal, I would like to discuss a little bit of politics with you, the US politics, what's been happening, in the US politics lately. So, you must be, like everyone, you must be also aware about the recent assassination attempt that happened on former President Donald Trump. So, what's your take on that? Because there are a section of people who are saying it is staged, and there are a section of people who are saying, who are speculating things basically. So, what's your take on this?
So, as a general rule, when people have conspiracy theories about the government, I always tend to think that they're not realistic, because a conspiracy would require the government to have ambition and incompetence to pull it off. And those are two things that just typically don't exist in the federal government. So I'm not inclined to think it's a conspiracy. Plus, one of the things that they're really looking at is the time distance, the timeline between when people saw the guy on the roof and when he was actually, neutralized, as they say. And anybody who's been involved in a crisis situation where you've got a whole bunch of different law enforcement agencies together realize that there is going to be lag time, as messages have to get relayed through different channels. So it just doesn't seem plausible to me that this was a coordinated event by the government. Really, if it was an attempt by the government, they would have had somebody that was a whole lot better shot, and not somebody that was an untrained marksman that really couldn't make the shot that he was trying to make.
All right. Thank you for answering the question, John. Also, recently, I think yesterday only, Trump have appointed JD Vance as the vice president, right? So, what do you think? How is it going to impact the current political landscape of United States?
Yeah, so JD Vance was an interesting choice. He's most famously, obviously, for his book, The Hillbilly Elegy. He's very much everything that Trump is not. He's a self-made man. He's very intelligent. He's very articulate. He has the credentials that you would actually want to see in somebody who's a presidential candidate. He's also married to, obviously, somebody of Indian descent, and so that's got a lot of things going for him. I like JD Vance. I think his philosophy aligns oftentimes with some of the policy issues. The interesting thing about Vance is he was a big voice in the Never Trump movement, and he's on record as thinking Trump was a horrible thing for American democracy. So it'll be interesting to see how much of a voice he has in the administration if they are elected, and how much he can temper Trump's more concerning tendencies that he has. So remains to be seen. But I like Vance. I think it makes the conservative base a whole lot more comfortable because it's somebody who is a legitimate, traditional conservative that's on the ticket as opposed to a MAGA fake conservative.
Okay, so you said you said right now that Trump has been a bad president. I mean, am I allowed to say that? I mean, I think this is what you meant, right? So,
Yeah. So
why do you see that?
Is a structural thing. The president is supposed to enforce the law, and the rule of law is the key issue. Nobody's above the law. Everybody has to follow the law, and the law is the most important thing. Trump doesn't really appear to have any, concern with the rule of law. He sees himself as a law unto himself, and that's troubling, especially with the Supreme Court's recent decisions on immunity. It gives him or an unethical president in the future a lot of leeway to do things that are very damaging to the country.
Okay, all right. Thank you for answering the question, John. Now, as you know, and as everybody knows, that America is known as a country, built by immigrants, right? So, yet there is a significant portion of population that believes that Trump's return to office would effectively, restrict immigration from any regions. So, what is your perspective on this issue? Is it going to happen? Do you think it's going to happen?
So there is definitely a part of the MAGA movement that is Christian white nationalist, and they want to make America as much as they can a Christian white person's country. Right now, I think that's just a minority of the country, but it's a very, very powerful group within the Republican Party. If the past is prologue, as they say, looking at Trump's last administration, nobody expected Trump to win. And so when he got elected, he didn't have a transition team in place. He didn't have people selected for key cabinet roles and even undersecretary roles. And so he was constantly underprepared and behind the eight ball. And they were making really stupid decisions as an administration very early, just because they weren't prepared. This time around, I think they're going to be far more prepared. They'll have personnel, a slate of people in place that they've already decided are, in line with Trump's views, and they'll be far more effective in getting their policy agendas, implemented. Their incompetence in the last administration was a saving grace to the rest of the country because they were so inept at what they were doing. It was easier to fight them and beat them in court. With a more traditionally experienced group of people in charge, it's a little more scary, what they can potentially do.
Okay, so now, but now let me talk to you about the other section of people. So, many are also unhappy with the current administration approach to border security, arguing that, they have open borders and has led to increase in illegal immigrants, right? And their association with crimes. So, they are basically feeling that this government is not taking adequate measures to address those issues. So, what are your views on this matter?
I think one of the biggest problems we have in this country in regards to immigration is a messaging problem. When Americans hear the word immigration, the only thing that they comprehend is people coming across the southern border illegally. the whole concept of high-skilled immigration from from people that we want for the economy, it just doesn't enter their mind. It's just a massive cognitive dissonance. And so when the topic of immigration comes up, that's all they're thinking about. And it's frustrating to see that the people that are breaking all the rules coming in through the southern border are the only ones that are getting any type of policy help or anything from the Democratic administration right now. The high-skilled people that play by the rules are getting treated poorly, while the people that broke the rules coming in from the southern border are getting all the perks. They're getting employment authorization. They're getting all kinds of cuts. And I think people are frustrated with the way that they're granting so many benefits to people that have broken the rules. That said, most Americans aren't really keyed into the fact that there is a big segment of people who are very influential for the economy that are playing by the rules that are also in the immigration system through the employment-based programs. And we need to do a better job about messaging that, just to educate Americans on high-skilled immigration and the benefits that it has.
Okay, and what's your take on these billionaires who have started, openly supporting Trump, and people like Elon Musk, and they have openly, now they are posting their tweets on X, saying that they are endorsing Republican, and they want Trump to win. So, what's your take on that? Because
I don't think
they
it's
are adding
terribly.
a lot to US's economy, right? So, and also Elon has a lot of influence on its youngsters. I mean, the whole country, and I would say the whole world. So, what's your take on that?
So, if you go back, there used to be campaign finance rules that were binding it and limited the amount of money coming into the political process.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court, got rid of almost all of those limitations, and now it has created all kinds of dark money coming in and extra money coming into the system that I think has really corrupted the system. It's no shock to me that billionaires who are increasing their percentage of the nation's wealth at a disproportionate rate are going to be contributing a minuscule amount of their money to get somebody elected that will make them richer. So it's no big shock to me that Elon Musk or any of these other guys are all in for Trump.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but also, John, if you follow, if you have followed, France's politics, recently they had election, and and everyone was expecting the far right to win, right? Le Pen's party to win. But then, and I think they also won the first round. But when the second round happened, they couldn't get that percentage of vote, and then the far left, the coalition, they formed their government. So it unexpected thing happened basically. So do you think something of that sort or something that similar can also happen in the US?
I don't think so, just based on the way the US electoral system works, where the House of Representatives is voted by regions within a state, and those congressional districts are highly engineered to produce one party to win that district. And the Republicans have had control of so many state legislatures for so long. They've redistricted and drawn the maps to basically guarantee Republicans will have at least half of the House of Representatives, or close to half of the House at least. So the House is going to be completely impossible to deal with. And then the Senate is going to be equally split, just based on the political makeup of the country. I just don't see a whole lot of change in our current system, unlike the French. It was encouraging, though, that the French said no to fascism. I wish we would do that here in this country, but I'm a little bit worried that we're going down that road.
hear me or not? Can you? Okay, can you hear me
Oh, I can
now?
hear you now. You cut out for a little bit. Yeah, you cut out for a sec. I lost you for a second.
All right, I'm here. So, okay, one last question. One last question about the political scenario and all that's been happening. So, if Trump were to return to the office, and then what changes or impacts, do you foresee for the country? What do you think? What should Americans expect in terms of policy shifts and governance?
So I think you should expect to see an even bigger expansion of the Department of Homeland Security, the number of people they hire for law enforcement and the removal process. I think you'll also see a much more emboldened Department of Homeland Security, with the officers being more aggressive and less concerned with constitutional rights and protections. I think that's the thing that I expect most to see happen. We've already seen DHS trending that way anyway, becoming overly aggressive, ignoring the law, and just implementing policies that they want, even when it's contrary to law. So that will only get worse with Trump.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, John, for answering those questions. I think I have taken like 18 minutes of our show discussing the politics, but now let's come to the main topic. Why we are here, So about the human trafficking Princeton scandal. So for the ones who don't know, and the ones who are watching us right now, and for the ones who don't know about this case, can you please provide an overview of the key details in this Princeton human trafficking case?
Yeah, so it comes out of Texas. Princeton, Texas is the name of the town where the case comes from. And from the details and the exact facts of the case aren't fully disclosed yet. So a lot of what we're looking at is pieced together from different news reports and a bit of conjecture. But so far what we know is that there was a house that called a pest control company, the bug exterminator, to come and treat the house. When the exterminator was there at the house, he saw what looked to be people living out of suitcases with no furniture. And he called the local law enforcement. So the local cops then got a warrant suspecting that there was human trafficking going on. They raided the place and went to press almost immediately with a statement that they had busted a human trafficking ring. It's important to note the federal government is not leading this prosecution or investigation. It's a state, local law enforcement issue, which tells me that the federal government doesn't see this as a legitimate human trafficking case. They are not jumping into it. The reason why you see the state court prosecutor jumping in front of the cameras immediately and making press releases and statements is, state court prosecutors, they get elected. So they're always looking for chances to get in front of the cameras and the media to make it look like they're tough on crime. And that pandering to the media and the public sometimes leads to them getting out in front of issues and then having to reel it back when there's nothing to the scandal that they have been advertising. The federal court system, prosecutors are appointed. They tend to stay out of the media as much as possible and really focus in on the law and the key issues. So that's the first thing I think is important to note, is who the players in this are and what that means for the likely outcome of the case. I suspect that there is some definite evidentiary and proof problems with pursuing a human trafficking prosecution.
Okay, so do you think so? I mean, do you think it was framed, or
No, I think it was just the pest control guy went to the house and he saw something that looked odd, and he called the local law enforcement. We're hearing anecdotal reports that the people that were there in the house were on F1 visas. They had finished their course of study, and they were on OPT looking for jobs. And so, if that's the case, it would definitely be an explanation why the federal government's not involved, because it's not human trafficking if they're already in the country and they're looking for work under a lawfully authorized program. So, if that's the case, then, I think the human trafficking case goes away rather quickly. Now, let's play with the facts and change the facts. If it was people that had been smuggled across the border, forced to work, in an IT situation like that, that would be human trafficking. And there is all kinds of rights and benefits that are granted to victims of human trafficking. And, there's the T visa for one, which, gets you an EAD and gets you on a path to a green card if you're a victim of trafficking that's cooperated with law enforcement. And, that protection on the T visa, could potentially even apply to some H1B workers as well, not just, an F1 or somebody like that, or somebody who's been smuggled into the country.
Okay, so do you think that this would provide, this would be any beneficial for the election campaign, or is it going to benefit the...
Yeah, so far the story is really only local. It hasn't really gotten a whole lot of traction nationwide. And until the federal government steps in and starts, really pushing this case in federal court, I wouldn't suspect it goes nationwide. And so I don't think it's going to have a whole lot of, legs, as they say.
Okay, but still, so how did these defendants, allegedly lure and recruit the immigrant workers to United States under this false pretense?
So again, what we're hearing is that these were people already in the U.S. They weren't lured into the U.S. or smuggled into the U.S. They're already here on an F1 visa. And if the rumors that we're hearing are accurate, they were on OPT looking for work, working. They were associated with a company looking for projects to be placed on. And they were working out of the house while they were looking for projects. If that story pans out as being accurate, there's really not a whole lot of potential legal liability there. But again, it's conjecture. We're just guessing at what the facts might be at this point.
Okay. But then, John, there were 15. I think there were 15 girls or who were found in the apartment. They had no furniture, nothing, and then 4 people have been arrested, of Indian origin. So, do you think? What's your take on this? Then, how? Why did so much?
Yeah. So again, it's a state court process. From what I understand, the state court prosecutors moved to seize the assets of the business owners, and that's a typical strategy for state court prosecutors, even federal court in some level, because if they seize that money, a lot of the time they can keep that money for their department's expenses. And so they're always looking for people with deep pockets that they can prosecute and seize money from to fund their operations without having to go to the taxpayer for it. So it's not terribly surprising that they are being overly aggressive in pushing this issue. Because once they see somebody's money, they have a lot of leverage for negotiating plea deals on lesser offenses and still keeping some of that money, if not all of it.
Okay. So, let's move on to our next question, because I still have a lot of questions pending that I want to know the answers to, and also I'm getting chat questions from the viewers also, so which will be taking in a bit. But also, John, if you can please tell us, what vulnerabilities did the immigrant victims in this case likely face that made them, targets for human trafficking schemes?
So if they were, forced to do labor without pay, they could either, qualify for the T visa, potentially the U visa, and then, but what they have to do in both of those situations is they have to make themselves available and cooperate with law enforcement. So that all that really requires is that, they're willing to engage in help in a prosecution if there is one. They give a statement to the cops. That's all that you need. And then when they file those visas, they go back to that law enforcement agency where they cooperated. They ask for an affidavit from them saying that they meet these criteria. And that's the biggest part of the visa application process, is that law enforcement certification.
So, what are the potential, penalties? They could receive if they get convicted.
So it would really depend on what they get convicted of.
Okay.
Right now, in the federal process, if they were charged with human trafficking or visa fraud or something like that, they would be looking at a pretty wide range of punishments. Human trafficking is going to get far more jail time and far larger penalties than, say, visa fraud. Most people that get convicted of visa fraud end up just, negotiating a plea deal where they do little to no jail time but pay a huge penalty. Human trafficking is a little bit different. That just strikes people as being a far more egregious crime, and federal prosecutors in those cases go for big jail time. So it would really depend on how they're prosecuted and what the crime is, and also who prosecutes them. Is it the state court system or the federal court system?
Okay. Also, the defense attorney in this case has dismissed the police claims, stating that the individuals were working in the IT sector and it was not forced labor, right? So, if you can also talk about what evidence supports to the claim of human trafficking and forced labor for this case, especially.
So, the evidence pointing to human trafficking, it's hard to say because they haven't really disclosed a whole lot of information that would be helpful, for the public to make that decision. But, if people were brought into the country without going through the regular process of getting an F1 visa or some other visa, if they were smuggled across the border and they were working and forced to work at that location, that would definitely be human trafficking. If they were already in the country and were just working, being forced to work here in the U.S. for this employer, that could potentially qualify for human trafficking, but it would require a lot of more facts for us to know if that meets the bill, as they say. So I would, at this point in time, I would say we just don't have enough information to say whether or not there was a real problem here.
Okay, but if I talk about the U.S. law, so as per the U.S. law, what constitutes human trafficking, and what are the evidences that can be given to prove that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is that somebody is illegally brought across the border, and that they are forced to engage in some type of labor against their will or without being compensated. When you have those two things, that's really going to be the focus of a human trafficking case. Most of the time, the trafficking cases that they focus in on with law enforcement are prostitution type issues where people are forced into sex slavery. And I think my suspicion is that the exterminator, when he saw what was happening, he thought that's what was happening, because it was all young women in a one house, and reported it that way to the police, and that's what triggered the police to get involved. If you had told them there was just a whole bunch of IT workers, working out of a house, I don't think the police would have been far as interested in the case as they were.
Okay. And so, John, what about the rights and protections, that are available to the immigrant victims, identified, in this case under, I mean, as you said, I think the
Yeah.
federal government is not, yeah.
So there's a whole lot of protections built into the law for people that oftentimes they're either not aware of or they don't take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at say the H1B program, in the H1B program, the law requires employers to pay the wage that's on the LCA, and if they don't pay it, you can file a complaint with the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor will force the employer to pay all back wages for that period of time for the LCA. So, that's a pretty strong protection that people have available to them in the H1B visa process. Now, with H1Bs, if it's an initial H1B, where you're coming into the country for the first time on the visa, if you were brought into the country and then not paid at all, or you're forced to work in situations that are different than what was on the petition, that could potentially qualify as human trafficking for the T visa. So you could potentially transfer from an H1 to a T visa. And the T visa is the trafficking victim visa. So if you have been unlawfully labor trafficked or forced into labor in the US, you can apply for that visa if you've cooperated with law enforcement. And it's a long process, but it would actually get people immigration status far faster than an EB2 or an EB3 visa if you're from India.
Okay. But also, John, in a case like this, so how would you advise the immigrant victims to navigate the legal system and, to assert their rights?
So it really just depends on the facts of the case. If there is evidence, that they were unlawfully trafficked, I would say T visa, 100%. Volunteer to work with law enforcement on the issue. Do whatever you can. But if the facts for human trafficking just aren't there, then that's really not going to be an option for them. It's really fact driven and fact dependent.
Right. And do you think because of the language barrier and, maybe a fear of deportation also affects the willingness of victims to come forward?
Oh, 100%. I think, the fear of deportation, law enforcement is a huge factor. USCIS hasn't done that any favors in the way they do enforcement of, say, like an H1B. With the way the law is set up, the H1B worker has a whole lot of leverage against the employer when they're not paid. What USCIS has been doing, though, is they're undermining the employee's leverage and they're undermining the employee's power. They're taking that power away because in their site visit process, they're asking for pay information. And if there's any discrepancy in the wage on the LCA or petition and what was actually received, they're revoking the visa and saying you have to leave the country. And so that is really taking away any incentive at all that people have to cooperate with the Department of Labor, because they would basically be outing themselves as somebody who's not getting paid, which would make them susceptible to USCIS kicking them out of the country. So that to me is incredibly frustrating as I'm watching what USCIS does, because it's stripping employees of a lot of power that they once were given by the law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And let's say they are willing to also testify, right? So then what measures are taken to ensure their safety?
So if they don't have to testify to qualify for a T visa, they just have to be willing to. So they give a statement, they make themselves available to law enforcement, and they cooperate in the investigation. And then typically, if you were in that situation, the law enforcement wants you around to testify. So there's not going to be any rush to get you deported or moved out of the country. And you'll have ample time to file, different visas or immigration benefits, because you'll have some protection and some ability to stay in the country when you get those things processed.
Right. So, okay. Also, are there any indications that, this trafficking network may have been operating in, other locations, or maybe exploiting workers in additional industries also?
We haven't really heard any facts that would support that. We haven't heard anything along those lines. Now, I'm sure there is trafficking. The two most common places where you see human trafficking, like I said earlier, is prostitution, but the other one is domestic servants. So people that have maids or child care providers that are working against their will or working without pay, brought into the country under false pretenses. That's the two most common places that we see that. It's really difficult for the domestic servants to get engaged with law enforcement, because a lot of times they're stuck in the home, and very tough for them. But likewise for the people that are victims of prosecution, it's tough because they're awfully closely monitored. But that's probably true of anybody who's trafficked for labor trafficking, regardless of the nature of the work they're doing.
Right. Also, you said that the victims were actually on F1 visa, right? They were students, basically, were looking out for jobs. So, suddenly also, John, there are a lot of OPT students have suddenly actively, they are seeking employment opportunities, from employers. So why do you think that's been happening?
So I think the economy is not quite what it used to be for the tech industry, and it's becoming more and more competitive to find jobs. The biggest problems that we're seeing right now is there's been a long stream of unscrupulous companies that have been offering jobs, conditional offers of employment to OPT students. And they go through a staged interview process. They interview people. They make it look like it's a very real, legitimate process. And then they offer them the job, and they say, but before we can hire you and put you on a project, you need some upgrade training. And then they charge the student for upgrade training. And that's the last time that the student really hears from them, is once they get paid. And so those companies, as they get found out by USCIS, really are the ones that should be getting prosecuted. They're the ones that should be penalized. But what USCIS is doing and DHS is doing is they're really not going after the companies. They're going after the students, and they're penalizing the students. So it's really important for OPT students to be careful about who the employer is that they're dealing with, and make sure it's a legitimate offer of employment.
Okay. So now let's quickly move to our viewers' question, because we've been getting a lot of questions from the viewers. And okay, so a lot of people are here. So hi, and a big hello to all of you. I hope the session is helpful and informative to you. And let me quickly take one question. So this question is actually from a viewer called Mangu, and this person says, so the girls have lied to get a T visa given the green card situation for Indian nationals?
So I'm not saying that they lied to get a T visa. We don't even know if they filed a T visa. We don't have any information whatsoever. It's just conjecture at this point. If the facts are one way, they would be eligible for a T visa, but we don't know if there are facts to actually support a T visa application at this point. From what we're hearing, it sounds doubtful that they would meet the requirements for a T visa, but until more facts come out into the public, it's impossible to say.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So there's this other person called Advumi, and he has a very different question. He says, not related to this topic, and he says, how does H1B visa end? So, do you have an answer to that, John? Would you like to take it?
That's a long answer. There's a lot of different ways an H1B visa can end. It can end on its own when it expires, when the validity date ends. It can end when the employer, withdraws it or fires you and gives notification to DHS that they're no longer employing you. It could end, when you max out your H1B time at 6 years if you don't have an immigrant visa in process. So, or it could end if you go through the immigrant visa process and it gets denied, and you no longer have an active immigrant visa petition. It could end then. And there's just a large variety of ways an H1 visa can end or expire on its own.
Okay. So, Advumi, I hope you have got the answer. Thank you so much for your question. Let us know if you have another question. He has actually posted this on Facebook, so he might be watching this session on Facebook. Let's quickly take one more question from the viewer, and the name is Jayesh. And he says, I am concerned about the recent arrest of Indian students in the US for alleged involvement in human trafficking. Given the gravity of the offense and the need to protect vulnerable individuals, do you believe the American police have a strong enough case to warrant the arrest? And are they properly equipped to handle the cultural and linguistic nuances of these cases?
So taking the last part first, no. They're most certainly not equipped to handle the cultural and linguistic nuances. That's an easy hit. But in terms of the arrest, from what we're hearing at this point, the only people that have been arrested were the business owners. So the business owners were arrested. The workers, the 15 students, I don't think there's been any disclosure from the police or anything that they've been arrested. I don't know that they're facing any type of penalty or any type of investigation.
Okay, so Jayesh, I hope you have got the answer to your question. Thank you so much for the question, and let us know if you have a follow-up. Meanwhile, let's take Meer's question. So Meer has also posted a lot of questions. So let's quickly take his. And he says, I'm really concerned. How has the scandal impacted, so I'm sure they are having this, they are really serious about this scandal, and they have a lot of questions. And I'm sure this session must be an eye-opener for them after listening to your answers, John. But still, I would like to take this question. He says, I am really concerned. How has the scandal impacted the reputation of Princeton University and its international programs, and what efforts have been made to restore the university's reputation and trust among international students and partners? What lessons can be learned from the Princeton Human Trafficking Scandal for other universities and institutions hosting international students? And okay, so there's basically please go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing is it wasn't Princeton University. So it was Princeton, Texas. So Princeton University really doesn't have any involvement in this story. So they really aren't taking any hit, and there's really no need to rehabilitate Princeton's reputation of their international student programs. But it's really not, the schools in this situation aren't really the focus of the investigation. The focus of the investigation is whether or not these people were forced into labor or not. And that's, on the employer side, not the school side.
Okay. So thank you so much, Meer, for your question. Let us know if you have another follow-up. Let's take Raj Shekhar's question. So Raj Shekhar says, what are the most common challenges in prosecuting human trafficking cases in the US, and how do societal attitudes contribute to these challenges?
I think the biggest problem, honestly is just getting the victims to come forward, or the victims having a chance to come forward. And part of that is the victims aren't educated on what their rights are. They're more afraid of law enforcement than they are of the people that are enslaving them. And so that's, I think, the big problem. And I think to a big extent, law enforcement's not really helping that problem, especially when you look at the different types of cases that we're looking at in human trafficking. Prostitution, if somebody comes forward and says they've been forced into prostitution, they could get arrested, and because it's illegal to be a prostitute. So there's a lot of reasons why folks would not come forward, and I think that's the biggest challenge, is lack of education of the victim group, as well as the approach law enforcement takes towards the victims.
Right. So Rajshekhar, I hope you have got the answer now. There are actually a lot of challenges. So let's take Geet's question also. And Geet says, what are the best practices for staying informed about and avoiding potential legal troubles?
So, when it comes to OPT, research. Make sure that the company you're working for is e-verified, has maintained its e-verification, that there's nothing going on. If they're not giving you projects, they're not paying you, if they're asking for a payment for any type of service that you have to provide, that's all good signs that you need to get out of that company or stay away from that company. Because DHS is definitely focusing in on those companies and the people that were associated with them. And they're penalizing the students. They're really not penalizing the companies. So you've got to be proactive and protect yourself. There's worse things than not getting a job on OPT and having to leave the country. Having a fraud finding against you is far worse. The reason is that once you have that fraud finding, you are pretty much forever blocked from entering the country again. So if you want a chance to stay in the U.S., be very, very careful and avoid those scam companies. Sniff them out and stay away.
But how would one know that these companies are scam companies? I mean, research, as you said?
Yeah, research, but also document. So document your correspondence. Make sure that your communication with them is an email or somewhere where you can capture that message. What we saw with these scam companies, they were doing WhatsApp where the messages would delete. So there was no no record of the communications that the employees could point to say, no, I thought this was legit and here's why, here's my communication. If you're asking for projects and they're not giving you projects, that's a big red flag. But the biggest red flag of all is a company that's asking you for money in order for you to qualify for work. That's the one I would say stay away from.
Okay, and also, John, for maybe for the students who are new to the country, and okay, can you hear me?
You broke up on me. So you said for students who are coming to the country?
Happened. Okay, right. I'm here now. I'm really sorry about the lag. I don't know why it's happening. Maybe a lot of viewers have joined us because of that. So I'm really sorry about it. So, okay. So I was saying that, maybe about the students who are new to the country and who are looking out for jobs and who are not much aware about the rules and the laws of the country, right? So how do they know that, okay, so the work that they're doing is not is forced labor?
Yeah, so ideally, the DSOs at the universities would be the gatekeeper and be doing a better job of vetting employers. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that happen. The other frustrating thing is that DHS itself is investigating these companies and has identified some of these companies as being illegal or scam companies, but they're not telling the public. So you don't really have any heads up or any notice that the company you're talking with in the recruitment process has problems and is going to cause you problems in the future. So the two gatekeepers that should be protecting you are completely not protecting you. So you have to be very proactive. And the things you've got to look for is, are they giving you work? Are they asking for payment from you? Are they not paying you? Because the things that you're going to want to show that you had valid OPT employment are the work that you did, that you performed, pay if you were paid in OPT or STEM OPT, that you were paid. And you want to be able to show that you were actually meaningfully employed. We see a lot of RFEs for students that are going for H1B, and they are really focusing in on the maintenance of status issue. And maintenance of status that they want to see is exactly that you were on a project, that you were doing something, gainful employment that was related to your degree. And if you don't have any work experience that you can point to, like where you were involved, it's going to be difficult to make it through that RFE for the H1B.
Okay. Thank you for answering the question, John. Also, a lot of other viewers are also here to ask their question. Faizan is here, and Faizan says some of the students applied STEM OPT from Amvotech, and that company got blacklisted and closed now, so that students will get the STEM extension. And how is that it?
So I've never heard of Amvotech before, but for the STEM OPT extension, they would have to find a new employer, obviously. But if Amvotech has problems in the past, those students need to start documenting everything that they can think of about their recruitment process, to show that the recruitment process looked like it complied with business standards or the typical business procedure, that it looked legitimate. They need to document or find documentation that they were requesting work from the company, that the company wasn't providing them work. And really what it comes down to, I think a lot of the time in these cases, is how long they stuck around without work, without a project. If you stick around past the 90-day mark, you exceed your maximum amount of unemployment time, it becomes really difficult to justify maintenance status for sure, but also the argument that you were unwittingly involved in a scam, that's a lot stronger when you're only with the company for a short period of time. So if they're not getting paid, if they're not getting work, very quickly look for a new employer, and also report it to DHS, because if you report it to DHS, that could potentially give you some protections.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Faizan, for your question. I hope you have got the answer. Gunjan is also here, and Gunjan says, I'm a parent of an international student in the US, and I'm terrified about the possibility of human trafficking. Can you tell me more about the resources available to help prevent this?
Yeah. So, with the Princeton, Texas case, again, we don't really know that it was human trafficking at this point. It soundy, but just in general, if people are asking you for money to get a job, stay away. If they're not able to point to actual work or actual clients you'll be working with, that's a red flag. So it's really on the students to have some due diligence and make sure that the company that's recruiting them is a real company that's got real work to do. We don't really see in the international student process, we don't see a whole lot of human trafficking. what we typically see is companies scamming them and extorting money out of them on a promise of employment or a promise of OPT experience, and then not following through and not giving it to them. And that fraudulent offer of employment comes back to harm the student. And so that's the biggest thing I think foreign students need to watch out for right now.
Okay. So Gunjan, I hope you've got the answer now. Thank you so much for your question, and follow what John has said. And now let's quickly take another question from Uday. And Uday has actually posted this on Facebook, and he says, how does this scandal impact the US jobs? Will there be any actions taken by the government?
So I don't think so. I don't think it's going to have any impact at all, mostly because if you look at who's leading the investigation in the early stages of prosecution, it's the state court prosecutors, not the federal prosecutors. And the federal prosecutors, if they were involved, it would have federal attention and federal interest. And the federal government's the one that sets immigration policy and priorities. They don't see this as a big concern, at least not yet. They don't see it as a human trafficking case yet. And so I really don't see it having any impact at all on policy or jobs in the US.
Okay, so thank you so much, Uday, for your question. So a lot of new viewers have also joined us, John. So there is Komal, and Komal just says, hi Komal, please let us know what your question is. Teja is also here, and Teja says, how does the scandal impact the US contract jobs in the USA? Will there be any consequences for Indian students?
So it doesn't really have any impact beyond the employees that are involved in that case and the employers. The bottom line is, though, is that DHS is extensively cracking down on people that worked for OPT employers or that were allegedly hired by OPT employers but never did any work. So you just got to be very careful that if you're with one of these employers, that you have proof and documentation of projects that you've engaged on. If they're not giving you projects, they're not giving you experience that's related to your degree, you need to document that and leave as fast as you can and report it to DHS.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Teja, I hope you have got your answer. Thank you so much for your question. Let's quickly take another question. So this is also an interesting one. Janvi says, if a fraud company hires us, how can we get out of the company if they take our information and try to put us on a payroll and never pay?
So just you leave, you resign. You're an at-will employee. There's nothing that says you have to stay with them. You just file your resignation and carefully watch the number of unemployment days you have on OPT. I'd also inform your DSO in a manner that is well documented that you can hold on to and retrieve later, like an email showing that you're alleging the company is abusive or is fraudulently offering employment. And again, I would consider reporting this to DHS so that they can investigate if they're not already investigating it. Unfortunately, a lot of times DHS already knows about these companies and they're not telling the public. They're just waiting for unsuspecting people to stumble into these companies. And once you have any association with them, you become suspect in DHS's eyes. So if you're not getting employment, if you're not getting work experience, you need to bolt and you need to quit that job.
Okay, and she's again back and she says, what if they don't reply?
Then send them a notice that you're an email, so you have something that you can point to at a later date. Send an email to whoever you've got or whatever medium of communication you've been using with them. Screenshot it, whatever, is informing them that you're resigning, and then report it to the DSO as well.
Mhm. Okay, all right. To our students who are watching this show right now, so guys, if you are a student and you've got into immigration trouble, so you can please book a consultation with Jonathan Wasden by visiting wasden.law. And you can also email him at support@wasden.law. Um, so he'll be able to help you. And John is again back, John, and she says, or let us leave legally. I don't know what that means.
So you can leave employment at any time. You're an at-will employee. There's nothing that says you have to get permission from an OPT employer to leave. You just send them an email saying, I'm out, I'm done, I quit. And that's all you need to do. Because realistically, if you're involved with one of these employers, an experience letter is not going to do you any good because there was no experience that you gained. So you need to get out as quickly as possible and make it official. Tell them you're done. Tell the DSO. And if it appears that they're a scam company, tell DHS.
Okay, and she says, "Thank you, John. Thank you so much, Johnny, for your question, for your questions, and Johnny, you or maybe other students who are watching us right now, if you're a student and got into immigration trouble, please book a consultation with Jonathan Wasden by visiting wasden.law, and also you can give him a call at 844-592-7336. I would like to repeat the number once again so that you can note it down. It's also scrolling below, 844-592-7336. And yes, and the email is support@wasden.law. Right. Thank you so much, Janvi, for your question. So, John, we have already, the show was supposed to be for an hour, but we have already covered an hour. So, if you have some time, I would still like to take, a few more questions, if that's okay for you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Tapan Kamble is also here. So Tapan says, what are the ethical consideration for law enforcement when dealing with international students involved in human trafficking cases? How can they balance enforcement with fairness and justice?
That's a good question. If they should approach it the same way they approach any type of enforcement action or investigation. But the key thing is they have to actually understand the rules associated with OPT and student employment programs, international students. And if you're dealing with a state court or state level enforcement, they're not going to know those rules at all. And they're not going to be able to understand the nuances and the impact or the import of what's going on. If you're dealing with the federal system, they should. And if you're suspecting that you're the victim of something like this, again, report it to the DSO, report it to DHS if you're comfortable doing that, and then document. Once you have the documentation, once you have taken proactive steps, that puts you in a much better light with the government. And I think that's probably being proactive is your best step.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for the answer, John. Okay. Guys, here are John's details. I would again like to display them on the screen so that you can note them down for yourself. You can give him a call at +1 844-592-7336. His email is support@wasden.law and his website is wasden.law. So you can visit his website, you can write an email to him, you can give him a call on his number. And yes, please get in touch with John. And one last question, John, for the show. So there is this viewer named Sanjeet, and he says, what are the key challenges Indian students face in the US legal system when implicated in scandals like the Princeton one, and how can they navigate? I think we already have taken this, right? But would you like to take it again?
Yeah, sure. So when you're dealing with an OPT employer that the government is suspecting is fraudulent or somehow not following the rules, your biggest concern is showing maintenance of status, or showing that you did not engage in fraud yourself. And those are the two things that are going to be your problem for you. Either maintenance of status for exceeding 90 days of unemployment time, or any type of documentation or notice that you provided to the DSO or the government, associated with that company. So the biggest challenge I think you're going to have if you are a victim of one of these companies is documenting your innocence. And I would make sure, if you're dealing with an employer who doesn't communicate in a way that's easily documented, that's a red flag. If you're dealing with an employer that is trying to take money from you before you can start working for them, big red flag. So if you're dealing with an employer that's not giving you work to do, it's a big red flag for your maintenance of status, because you're not really employed. You're just accruing time that does not have any relationship to the degree that you just completed. That's one of the requirements of OPT. So watch out for all of those things and quit. Again, you do not need permission of an employer to quit. You can quit at any time.
Okay, so Sanjeet, I hope you have got your answer. Thank you so much for the question. And John, I said it is going to be the last one, but I don't think so. It will be. We have one more. So Mohammed Wasim is here, and Wasim says, how is the Princeton University addressing the issue of human trafficking through its research, policy advocacy, and community initiatives, and what are the notable outcomes of these efforts?
So Princeton University is really not doing anything because they're not involved in this scandal. It's Princeton, Texas. It's a town in Texas. So this doesn't have any impact whatsoever on Princeton University.
Okay, so Wasim, thank you so much for your question. I hope you have got the answer. It's as simple as that. And okay, John, I promise this is the last one. And this is from Chitranjan. And Chitranjan says, legal professionals play a role in educating the public about human trafficking and combating it.
So I guess the question is, do legal professionals play a role?
Yeah.
As much as we can. Yeah. As much as we can, we try to. It's just a matter of who listens and how much of a voice we have. The people that really should be doing the best job educating the public are the people that are paid to protect the public and enforce the laws. Unfortunately, they're not doing their job. They're not doing anything to protect you, the participants in the OPT program. So it's really up to you to get the information and the resources to protect yourself and make sure that you're not at risk of damaging your immigration future. Because DHS is not going to do anything to help you out. If there's one thing we've seen for 100% certainty, they have no interest in protecting the OPT students.
Right. Thank you so much, John, for your time, and thank you so much for such insightful answers. It was great having you, and now we are going to have you every week on Wednesday. So thank you so much for that as well, for giving us your time. So before I let you go, thank you so much. It was a great episode, and looking forward to next week, next Wednesday.
Thank you. It's good being here.
Thank you so much. And to our lovely audiences, I would like to tell you that if you're a student and got into immigration trouble, so please, you can book a consultation with Jonathan Wasden by visiting his website, wasden.law, and you can give him a call at +1 844 592 7336. His email is support@wasden.law, and like I said, his website is wasden.law, so you can also visit his website. And if you're looking for a project placement or visa sponsorship, you can reach out to me on my number, which is +1 732 707 9151. My email is rajni@higheritpeople.com, and our website is www.higheritpeople.com. Remember, we sponsor H1B visas and other work visas based on job availability and regulations. All right. Thank you so much again, John. It was great having you on the show.
Good talking to you.
Thank you. Okay, so it was a great episode, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Such huge numbers, and but that will be a wrap for today's episode. But understanding, immigration policies, and I know it might be complex, but it is necessary to understand them. And stay tuned for more exciting, discussions and webinars on immigration and jobs talk show. So I'll see you all tomorrow, but. Until we meet again, like I say, always keep subscribing and keep watching to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm your host, Rajni Bharara. Bye for now.
Consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry. Exceptional employee benefits. Highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us on the number 732-707-9151 or mail us at rajni@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www